Salam and peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase, and together we now open a new chapter in our journey. This is episode 7, part 1, The Return to the Tree, Seeing the Whole Language at Once. Before we climb higher, we pause, breathe, and look back at the road behind us. Only then can we understand what episode 7 is really doing and why it is different from everything that came before. From episode 1 to episode 6, we were not just collecting nice ideas, we were slowly changing the way we look at reality itself. Step by step, we were replacing the old picture of things in space pushed by forces in time with a new picture. One continuous holophase, phi, speaking in a rich, structured language. From many things to one rhythm. We began with a question that has silently haunted human thought for thousands of years. Is the universe made of many different kinds of stuff and forces, glued together by rules we memorize? Or is there one deeper something, one organizing principle, from which time, space, motion, matter, and even energy all emerge as different faces? Episode 1 answered that question with a bold proposal. There is one field called phi, spelled Phi. Phi is the holophase, not a material substance like clay or water, but a cyclic rhythm defined at every point in the universe. At each location, phi has a phase, like the hand of a tiny clock. What matters is not its absolute value, but how it changes and differs from place to place and moment to moment. We explored what it means to treat this phase as the most basic ingredient. We saw that you can shift phi everywhere by the same amount, and nothing observable changes. Only differences in phi, only its gradients and time changes carry real physical content. That simple fact already hinted that reality is fundamentally about relationships, not absolutes. Dethroning energy. In episode 2, we took one of the most sacred words in physics, energy, and gently moved it off the throne. We said, energy is not the ultimate stuff of the universe. Energy is a tally, a sophisticated bookkeeping of how phi is changing. When we speak of energy, we are reading off patterns in the holophase, not touching the deepest layer itself. This was not a small step. It was a shift from energy as ontic substance to energy as a measurement layer on top of a more primitive field. We compared energy to the numbers on a speedometer. Useful, precise, essential, but still a reading of motion, not the motion itself. In the same way, energy becomes a reading of the activity of phi, not the thing that exists on its own. The birth of dimension, 3 echoes of one field. Later, as the journey unfolded, we turned to the birth of dimension. We asked, how does time appear? How does space appear? How does motion appear? Traditionally, they are treated as 3 separate background categories, as if they were empty boxes waiting to be filled with matter and energy. In our journey, we discovered something radically different. We found that time, space, and motion can all be read as simultaneous echoes of how phi changes. Phi's change in time gives a temporal echo, which we call omega, spelled O-M-E-G-A. Phi's change across space gives a spatial echo, which we call K. And the way patterns of phi move, guided by both omega and K together, gives a kinematic echo, which we call V. Time, space, and motion are not 3 unrelated ingredients. They are 3 readings of one underlying process, the way the holophase unfolds. The universe is not sitting in time and space. Instead, time and space are the ways we experience the changing and weaving of phi. Sitting with each echo. In the middle episodes, we spent time with each of these echoes. We sat with the temporal echo, omega, as the local ticking rate of reality. We pictured the universe as filled with tiny clocks, each one attached to a point in space, each one ticking at its own rhythm. Omega told us how fast those clocks turn. Where omega is larger, events unfold more rapidly. Where it is smaller, things evolve more gently. We linked this to our own experience of time, sometimes feeling fast, sometimes slow, and we grounded that intuition in the behavior of phi. We then moved to the spatial echo, K, as the weave of space. We imagined phi as a pattern painted across the universe. Where K is large, the pattern changes quickly from point to point. Sharp edges, fine textures, tightly packed ripples. Where K is small, the pattern is smooth and gentle. We used analogies of waves on water, woven rugs, mountain landscapes, and even musical chords to make K feel concrete. We then turned to motion V as something that is not independent but born from the relationship between omega and K. We used the surfer analogy. Imagine riding a water wave. To stay on the same part of the wave, you must move with a certain speed. That speed is determined by the shape of the wave and how fast it is oscillating. In holophase language, motion is how fast you must move to stay on the same phase crest. That is how V is built from omega and K. This was one of the deepest shifts of the whole series. Motion is not a free extra. It is a consequence of how the underlying phase pattern evolves in time and space. Time, space, and motion become three ways of reading one unified structure, three different projections of the same unfolding story. We did not stop there. We explored the temporal dimension in more detail, how omega can itself change, giving alpha and higher temporal derivatives, capturing accelerations and more subtle shifts in the rhythm of time. We explored the spatial dimension in more detail, how K can curve, converge, shear, and twist, shaping the geometry of patterns and the paths along which things move. We explored the kinematic dimension in more detail, how V can bend, accelerate, and reorganize under the influence of the phase landscape. Step by step, we built a picture in which the three dimensions are born together, not separately. They co-emerge from the behavior of phi. The universe, in this view, is an enormous, self-organizing oscillation whose echoes we call time, space, and motion. Episode 6: From Equations to Language. As Episode 6 arrived, we made a decisive move. We stopped treating phi and its derivatives as abstract objects and started treating them as letters in a language. We introduced the master tree of the holophase, a branching structure that begins from phi at the root and rises into an infinite canopy of derivatives. We said, let us stop thinking in isolated formulas. Let us think in terms of a living language. At the root lies phi itself, the silent, global rhythm, invisible on its own because only differences and changes carry observable content. Phi is like the blank page and the ink at the same time, always there, but meaningful only when shaped. From that root rise the first branches. The time echo, omega, representing how fast phi's phase turns in time at each point. The space echo, k, representing how phi's phase twists and changes across space. The unified change, the total change of phi when we nudge both time and space together. The motion echo, v, the velocity that keeps you riding the same phase crest, built from the relationship between omega and k. These first branches form the core alphabet of the holophase language at the most basic level. They were our first letters, the ones from which all higher expressions are built. From there, we climbed to the next layer, the nuance block of second derivatives. We met alpha as the change of the temporal tone, how the local ticking rate itself speeds up or slows down. We met curvature as the measure of how the slope of phi changes in space, shaping how patterns focus or spread. We met convergence and divergence, twist and shear, as ways that patterns compress, rotate, or slide past each other. These second derivatives became the adjectives and accents of the language, adding richness to the simple nouns and verbs below. Then we saw how higher derivatives, third, fourth, and beyond, form infinite towers of refinement, adding more and more detail to how phi's structures change in time and space. We realized that the language of reality is, in principle, infinitely nuanced. No matter how many layers of derivative structure we uncover, There is always another level of refinement above. Topology, waves, and daily life. Side branches grew out into topology. We explored knots and defects in phi, places where you can walk around in a loop and find that the phase has wound by a whole number of turns. These defects define the digital backbone within the analog field, discrete charges, vortices, and particle-like entities emerging from continuous structure. We call the set of such defects sigma, the skeleton of points and lines where phi cannot be smoothed away. From there, we followed waves and messages. We saw that when phi organizes itself into repeating patterns in time and space, it creates waves with specific relationships between omega and k. These relationships, called dispersion rules, behave like grammar rules. They decide which combinations of rhythm and pattern are allowed to travel in a given medium. We discovered that there are two kinds of motion embedded in such waves. Phase motion, the speed at which individual crests move. Group motion, the speed at which packets of information and energy travel. We understood that group motion, the motion of the wave envelope, is where signals live. We linked this to light pulses in fiber optics, to musical notes traveling through air, and to wave packets in quantum experiments. In the later parts of episode 6, we turned to daily life. We reread light, sound, solid objects, and even our own thoughts in holophase language. Light became a specific mode of phi, vibrating extremely fast with a special link between omega and k. Colors became different relationships in that link. We imagined an invisible phase hand spinning at each point where light is present. Too fast to see, but writing the patterns our eyes detect as brightness and color. Sound became slower. Tangible ripples in media like air and water, guided by the same phase grammar. We imagined air molecules as messengers of phi, pushed and pulled in patterns that our ears decode as tones, voices, and music. Solids became long-lived, knotted and patterned configurations of phi, full of allowed vibrations and normal modes. The stiffness of a table, the clarity of a glass, the ring of a metal rod, all became expressions of which phi patterns are allowed to live in those materials and which are quickly damped out. Thoughts and brainwaves became deeply nested phrases in phi, as the brain's oscillations and structures organized themselves into self-referential patterns. We were careful not to oversimplify consciousness, but we anchored it in the same physical language. Whatever else awareness may be, it rides on configurations of phi. Neurons become local readers and writers of the phase, sending and receiving oscillatory messages within the larger story. Finally, in the closing parts of episode 6, we spoke about information, memory, and code. We saw that whenever phi arranges itself into a pattern that can be reliably recovered, we can talk about information. Whenever that pattern persists, we talk about memory. Grooves on records, magnetic bits, DNA sequences, neural connections, fossils in rock, all of them became different ways phi writes durable shapes into itself. We recognize that human-made digital codes, binary bits, DNA letters, written alphabets, are special, deliberately chosen subsets of the vast analog possibilities that phi can express. They are like narrow, tidy roads built on top of an older, richer landscape. Under every printed word, every data file, every genetic sequence, there is a deeper, continuous phase story. At the end of episode 6, we arrived at a powerful but simple intuition. Information is shape, memory is lasting shape, messages are moving shape. All of these shapes live in phi. We stopped with the sense that reality itself is a universal script, and that we are already reading and writing in it, whether we know it or not. Episode 7, From Scattered Insights to a Full Language. Now episode 7 begins. Episode 7 is where we stop treating this as a scattered collection of insights and start treating it as what it really is, a complete language of reality. Episode 7 is the literacy chapter of our journey. Until now, we have heard many beautiful phrases and powerful metaphors. Now we step back, see the whole grammar at once, and learn how to read and write more fluently. In part 1 of episode 7, our task is simple but deep. We return to the master tree. We see the whole language at once, And we understand what it means to call this structure not just a code, but a living, generative language that the universe speaks. So let us stand again before the tree, this time with the full weight of episodes 1 to 6 alive in our minds. Standing before the master tree. Imagine you are standing in a quiet, open space. The master tree of Holophase rises before you, huge and luminous, but we describe it only with words. At the very base, the root glows softly. That root is Phi. It does not shout, it does not draw attention to itself. It is the quiet, continuous rhythm out of which everything else is shaped. You cannot point a device directly at Phi and say, there it is. You only know Phi through its effects, through its echoes in time, space, and motion, through the patterns it draws in the world. From that root, the first branches rise. One branch is the time echo, omega. It describes how fast the tiny phase hand at each point turns with respect to what we call time. High omega means fast internal rhythm. Low omega means slow internal rhythm. Another branch is the space echo, K. It describes how sharply the phase changes as we move across space. Large K means patterns that change rapidly from point to point, like tightly packed ripples. Small k means slowly varying smooth patterns. The third branch is motion, V. It is not a separate ingredient poured from the outside. It is built from the relationship between omega and k. It answers the question, if I move in such a way that I stay on the same phase crest, how fast and in what direction must I go? V is the riding speed along the wave of phi. These three branches form the tri-unity of time, space, and motion. Three faces of one evolving field. Every phenomenon you know has all three faces at once, even if you usually look at only one or two. Now look higher. From omega, k, and v, the tree branches into nuances, derivatives of these derivatives. How does omega itself change in time and space? That gives alpha and other temporal nuances. How does k bend, twist, and focus? That gives curvature, convergence, shear, and twist. How do time change and space change feed into each other? That gives mixed derivatives, the first hints of space-time crosstalk. Higher still, the tree stretches into infinite towers. Each step upward asks, how does this change? And then, how does that change? And so on, without end. Each higher derivative sharpens the description of how phi behaves, like adding more detail to a sketch until it becomes a detailed drawing. Out to the sides, the tree sprouts topological branches. Here live winding numbers and defects. These are places where phi's smooth story breaks and loops back on itself in non-trivial ways, creating patterns that cannot be undone without tearing. These topological letters create the stable, digital-like entities we call particles and charges. Interwoven with these branches are wave branches, where phi writes itself as moving patterns that carry influence and information across space and time. And wrapped through everything, like a subtle glow, are quadratic measures and balances. Simple combinations of derivatives that tell us how intense, how balanced, and how costly particular configurations are for the universe to maintain. This is the tree. In episode 6, we walked around its lower levels, touching each part one by one. In episode 7, we will begin to see it as a single, coherent language. What it means to be a language. What does that mean? First, it means that phi and its derivatives do not form a random list. They are linked by deep, consistent rules. The higher branches do not contradict the lower branches. They refine them. The topological branches do not float freely. They grow from the continuous field at the root. The wave branches do not exist apart from omega and k. They are built from them. The balances at the upper levels do not ignore the details below. They summarize them. Second, it means that this structure is generative. With a finite stock of basic letters and rules, Phi, its first derivatives, its second derivatives, its topological constraints, its wave grammars. The universe can form an effectively infinite number of different sentences: galaxies, atoms, storms, organisms, thoughts, cultures, and beyond. Third, it means that this language is tridimensional at every level. Every node of the tree, no matter how abstract it sounds, has expressions in time, space, and motion. You can always ask, how does this show up in temporal patterns, in spatial structures, in motion and trajectories? If the holophase language is real, the answers to these questions must fit together consistently. Fourth, it means that this language is falsifiable. Every claim we make about phi and its derivatives can be tested through experiments that measure time behaviors, spatial patterns, and motion together. If reality refuses to be described in this unified language, then the holophase program must be revised or rejected. We are not asking for belief. We are building a framework that can be broken if it is wrong. So, in part 1 of episode 7, you are invited to do something quietly profound. Do not try to memorize every technical term. Instead, let the following simple picture settle in your mind. There is one underlying rhythm, phi. Its changes generate three echoes at once: time, space, and motion. Those echoes and their higher patterns form a vast tree of derivatives. This tree is not just a catalog, it behaves like a language. Everything you see, touch, hear, think, and remember is written as patterns in that language. The inner shift. Before we turn the page, I want to invite you to feel, personally, what has already changed in you since episode 1. At the beginning, phi may have sounded like just another symbol in a crowded physics textbook. Now, after 6 episodes, phi has become a character you recognize. You know that when you hear phi, you are not just hearing about a number or a field. You are hearing about the underlying rhythm out of which time, space, and motion are read. At the beginning, time, space, and motion might have seemed like silent, unquestioned backgrounds, containers into which things are placed. Now you have rehearsed the idea that they are echoes. Time is the echo of how phi turns. Space is the echo of how phi varies across locations. Motion is the echo of how features of phi move when those two echoes are combined. You might notice that when you watch a wave on water, or a car accelerating, or a beam of light entering glass, an extra question has started to appear in your mind. What is the phase story here? What is phi doing behind the scenes? That question is the seed of literacy. Episode 7 will not suddenly replace everything you know. Instead, it will connect what you already know into a single language. It will give you a way to say, in one breath, this phenomenon has this temporal pattern, this spatial structure, this motion behavior, and together they form this phi sentence. By the end of episode 7, when you hear the phrase holophase language, you will not think of something mystical or vague. You will think of a concrete structure, a root field, phi, with shift symmetry. First derivatives, giving the three echoes, omega, k, and v. Higher derivatives, adding nuance and curvature. Topological structures, adding robust digital labels. Wave structures, adding transport and communication. Quadratic measures, adding intensity and balance. Dimensional echoes, ensuring every letter has time, space, and motion faces. All of that, working together, will become a single mental object for you. The master tree as a language, not as a list. The deeper gift, however, is not only technical, it is also emotional and philosophical. When you see reality as written in a single language, you begin to feel less like a spectator looking at a machine and more like a reader walking inside the living text. You begin to sense that your own body, your own brain, your own stream of consciousness are chapters in the same story. You are not outside the holophase, studying it from a safe distance. You are a holophase configuration trying to understand itself. That shift can be humbling. The universe is far larger, richer, and more intricate than any of our theories. But it can also be deeply reassuring. There is a unity to all of this. There is a single continuity beneath galaxies and cells, under storms and cities, under dreams and equations. Holophase is not a slogan claiming to explain everything with one magic word. It is a careful attempt to show how a single, well-defined physical quantity, a phase field with clear rules, can generate the full variety of phenomena we observe, step by step, through its derivatives, its defects, its waves, its balances, and its echoes. In episode 7, we will also keep one principle right at the center: falsifiability. This language is not a myth we are asking you to believe. It is a proposal we are inviting you to test. Wherever the holophase description fails to match experiment, where the triunity of time, space, and motion does not hold up, where the derivative structure does not predict correctly, there we must learn, correct, and, if necessary, let go. So as you listen to the rest of episode 7, you can keep two hearts beating together. One heart enjoying the beauty of the picture, the tree, the language, the unity. And the other heart staying sharp and precise, always asking, how would we measure this? How would we test this? What would a failure look like? Together, those two hearts, wonder and discipline, are the real companions of this journey. For now, rest with this image. A single luminous tree, one quiet root, phi. Three first branches, time, space, motion. Infinite higher branches, nuance, topology, waves, balance, identity. And you, standing inside that tree, listening to the universe speak in its own tongue. That is the starting point for episode 7. You have walked from episode 1 to episode 6. You have met Phi, dethroned energy as the ultimate substance. Learned to see time, space, and motion as echoes. Met the master tree. Explored waves, defects, information, and memory. You have seen how daily life can be reread in this language, and how your own memories are scripts written in Phi. Episode 7 opens with a promise. We will gather all those threads into one coherent language and start reading the universe more fluently. Salam and peace be upon you until part 2.